Welcome to Miles to Zen, a podcast that celebrates life's delightful twists and turns, no matter where you are on your journey. I'm your host, Shannon Miles Halliday, a follower of curiosity, a mom, a wife, a former corporate executive, and a creator. And if you are new, welcome. I am so pleased you found this podcast. And if you are a returning listener, I am honored and thank you so much for being on this journey with me and helping to create a wonderful community here. I am thrilled to bring you today's episode with Sam Plavins. She is such an example of how just because you are one thing doesn't mean you can't transform yourself to something completely different. Sam was a former workaholic who set out to walk all 800 kilometers of the Camino trail, where she had the epiphany that her career in finance was actually killing her. She launched her business, She Walks the Walk, in 2020, through which she helps women rediscover themselves through her global walking adventures, urging us to step off that treadmill because life is now, not in some fantasy future. She's led her clients on epic journeys to Norway, Tanzania, Guatemala, and Jordan. And Sam lives in Thunder Bay, Ontario, with her husband, 2 teenagers, and a dog. Today's episode literally feels like a coffee date. My cat makes an appearance, and I hope you feel like you're having a coffee date right here with us. And stick with us to the end, and I have a story of synchronicity to share with you that blew our minds. So without further delay, let's jump in. Hi, Sam. Welcome to the podcast. So thrilled to have you here today.
Thank you, Shannon. I'm stoked.
And welcome back. I know you just got back from a rather epic trip because I've been stalking you on your Instagram and I've seen all the footage, and I'm so glad that you share because that is so fun. It's the best armchair traveling I've done in a long time.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Yep, it was the adventure of a lifetime. I am in re-entry right now where, just silently to myself, I'm like, oh, what I would give to continue hiking and be in the place where, people are peaceful and happy and content, but it is great to be home.
I want to hear more about that. We've heard your bio at the beginning. Maybe you can tell our listeners just a little bit about you and how you got from the Sam you were before, who's working on a corporate day job, to this Sam who's going regularly across the world and having these amazing adventures.
For sure. So where do I even start? I guess the easiest way to sum up is that I was a girl on a treadmill, working a bazillion hours a week in a family-owned business, and I was feeling pressure to be a productive business partner and to make my father happy and to make my clients happy. And I did not love what I was doing. I come from a background in the arts, and here I was working in finance and crunching numbers and creating plans for people. And I felt like a little bit like disingenuous to myself because my whole shtick was helping people plan for their future and protect against risk. And I am a girl who embraces uncertainty. I like just the beauty and mystery of not knowing how things will work out. And I like the path less traveled. And I also very much subscribe to, life is short and life is now. So it was like there were two roads that didn't really connect together. And I did a walk across Spain. It was the Camino in 2019. And I asked myself the question, like, is this it? Can I be true to myself? Is it selfish to want to be happy with what I do? And I got all my answers.
You were still working at that phase. And then so
Yeah.
you just managed to take an extended leave.
Yeah. So I was very blessed with being self-employed. So I basically had to just kind of look in the mirror and figure out if I could set up the business so that the clients were taken care of and we had some staff. And then, of course, my business partner, who was my father at the time, he was like, Sam, you need to go, because he
Oh,
saw the writing on the wall. Like
amazing.
I was going to have a nervous breakdown. I was not doing well mentally, and I had had a burnout in the past. So he was like, go search your soul,
Oh,
and you know whatever decision you make, come back and we'll figure it out. And
and
six
how old?
months later, we
Yes,
did.
you figured it out. Amazing. How old
Yeah.
were your kids at the time?
At the time I did the Camino, they were 11 and 16.
Okay.
Yeah. I will say I have a very, very supportive husband who was like, you know, like I got to dip from my life for 5 weeks, and he held down the fort, and he was Mr. Mom, and he had his own stressful job. So a lot of stars had to align to allow that kind of self-reflection to happen.
Yeah.
But the good news is that I when you're away from all of like the noise and the pulls in your life, you can get very clear. And I got clear, and we left the business 6 months later, and I had this idea of wanting to start a hiking adventure company for women. And then there was the pandemic, yada, yada, yada. So here I am, sort of building out from there. And that's the
Yeah.
nutshell.
Oh, that's amazing. I took a break from life, but only 5 days, really, in 2023 when I went to Hawaii, and I just went by myself. I did ask if anyone wanted to come, and everyone's like, no, too short notice. And it was
Mm-hmm.
fabulous. It was
Mm-hmm.
great. I may have made changes in my own life a little quicker had I done the Camino. So it's
Yeah,
still
you
on
know
the
what?
list, still on the list.
I I recognize that, not everyone can dip from their life for that period of time. And that's one reason why I'm trying to curate these sort of mini pilgrimages for women, because I don't necessarily think you need, 5 weeks of pavement pounding to examine your life. 5 days is great, but what I find is that women, they overthink it. They put a lot of guilt on themselves if they put themselves on the list. So,
Yeah.
like, some women won't even take 5 days for themselves, or even one day.
Yeah. Yeah. People, when I went, and I did a post, I think on Instagram, or a few posts, and people immediately started calling my husband to ask if our marriage was okay. And just the
Stop.
thought of me leaving somewhere without him, he goes on a motorbike trip every year for 7 to 10 days. Nobody calls me and asks me if our marriage is okay. I go on a trip by myself for 5 days, and people start calling. Isn't that hilarious?
That is bonkers. And that is just a reflection of, sadly, this patriarchal world that we live in, that women need to serve. And how dare
Yeah,
we take a like one moment for ourselves,
yeah.
not to be dramatic, but that is crazy.
Is it? It is crazy.
Yeah.
It is. It is crazy. I'm super lucky, like you. I've got a very supportive husband who is pushing me out the door to go do these things.
Hmm.
And it's just like, you go. This is fantastic. You've got to go. He'd be all over that. And
I mean, here's to supportive partners, right?
right, probably the most important decision you're going to make is if you are choosing a life partner, and who that's going to be, because that's, what is it, you become the 5 people you spend the most time around, and you're
Oh,
going to
yeah,
have that
yeah.
mirrored back to you of their state, their mental state, and
Hmm.
their idea of their limitations, and therefore your limitations,
Hmm.
and if somebody's going to support you or not, no matter what. And it doesn't always
Yeah.
look pretty. I realized that just yesterday. I was like, oh man, this is my 20th year of going to seasonal parties with you, to my husband. And
Oh,
yeah, or 19th or 20th. And isn't that funny? That's just like, time goes by so quick. And I just
was looking back at all these different things that you go through and how you do evolve as a couple, and you evolve as what you want to do and what you don't. And when we first got married, he was like, of course I'll follow you anywhere you want to go. But the reality
Oh my
is
gosh.
then people get into their lives, and he's like, well, probably not at the moment. We can't
Yeah.
now. And we
No,
certainly
that's
can't go
very
and
funny.
get a dog.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That is actually so true, and I will say, in all sincerity, I'm not sure I'm as supportive a person as my husband is of me. Like, just keeping it real, if he had said to me, "I'm gonna quit my career and walk away from security and work on this nebulous idea that I have," I would have been like, "Hell no." I mean, certainly at first, but at the end of the day, maybe I probably would have come around because obviously his mental health
Mhm.
would be very important. And, you know, I could talk ad nauseum about mental health, but it really is a key component, in my opinion, to having the courage to take action is having that support system.
So, Sam, tell me, how did somebody who came from an arts background, and I'd love to know more because my podcast is all around curiosity and creativity and connecting. And now I'm coming back into my creative self, which is
Mhm.
fantastic. I've always dabbled in creative, but during COVID, I got the gift of being a heck of a lot more creative and started to paint, and just have had so much fun with that. And then the last couple of years, as my career was really crazy, I found that I had time for writing only. So I would write in the
Mhm.
morning and not so much on the painting side. But what did your creative beginnings, schooling, art background look like?
So I studied music in university.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I have a degree in performance piano, and I was a dancer growing up, like literally almost 100% right brained. You know, I did not enjoy math or science. I never imagined in a million years I would end up in the world of finance. But what happened was my dad he'd always been in finance, and he got me in a moment of, I jokingly say, weakness, because I was tired and I just had a baby. And he was like, my company is getting bigger and I need a succession plan. And of you three children, you would be the best. So it was like, I was a classic, firstborn, want to please my dad. And so I left what at the time it was my dream job, working in the performing arts at the National Arts Center in Ottawa.
Amazing.
So I left that and moved back to my hometown in Thunder Bay and studied all about finance and went and got all the licenses, and the rest is history. That was in 2004. So I gave it a really good go for 16 years,
You did.
which is
You
a
did.
long time for me to keep thinking, am I going to start liking this? Am I going to enjoy it? And I enjoyed working with clients, and I liked being self-employed, and I loved working with my dad, but it's a heavily regulated industry. There is absolutely no room for self-expression. In fact, it's
Mm.
frowned upon. You're not really allowed to have a voice or an opinion unless it's the corporate party line. So that really rubbed me the wrong way because it felt like a part of me was cut off.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I felt the same way. I just felt like I was just tied up, and
Yes.
I kept on seeing all these hawks and eagles everywhere for like a couple years, just way more than usual in odd places. Then when I left my job, and it was great in so many ways, it was great. I just felt like I was shaking those wings out. And
Oh my God.
it just felt so freeing. And just like that that box that you had to fit yourself in as well, it's just like it's shaken off. And a friend of mine said, that's why you were seeing so many birds.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Signs. I totally believe
Yes.
that.
I had an
I
eagle
think
fly in front of my house. I'm in East Van. It just doesn't happen very often.
no, no, those birds were trying to talk to you, girl.
Yes. I'm listening.
No kidding. I think that's wild. And part of what I I guess part of what I'm trying to do with helping other women is figure out, if you say that something matters to you, i.e., adventure or feeling free or expressing yourself or being creative, but your life is not in alignment with that, then you are effectively out of alignment with yourself. And that's what was going on with me in that corporate world for so many years.
Right.
And, the upsides, which at first felt like more than enough to kind of keep the peace, which was really good money and making my dad happy. Eventually, it doesn't really matter what you're making or how much you feel like you're pleasing someone else. If you are feeling like you're dying inside, that's not a life.
Mm-hmm.
I sound
So
so dramatic, but I'm just being honest.
I love it. So when you go on your trips and you have a bunch of women, how many people per se come on your trips with you?
Usually we have between 6 and 10.
Okay. And do people normally come solo or do they come with a friend?
I've had both, but a lot of times it's just women taking a chance and showing up and not knowing who they're going to be with. And yeah, they're doing the whole solo thing.
Oh, amazing. And I want people to understand when they think of your business as really and the experience, because I think you're an experience. You're not a business, you're an experience. And so people, they join one of your trips and they have in mind this may be the first time that they're doing anything for themselves really, or they wanted to explore somewhere new but didn't want to go on their own. So can you just give us a quick rundown of how what does that trip look like? Do people like meet you at a certain spot? Do they meet you at a certain airport? Where do you all get together?
Yeah, so I'm going to actually back up just just to begin, because there are loads of things that women who maybe have never traveled on their own. There's loads of companies that you can sign up for and have a great adventure. So I think what attracts people to She Walks the Walk is that we come at these adventures with the concept of we are going to be intentional in our hiking and in our walking. We recognize that we want to examine our lives. We believe that the inner journey matters. So they're not just looking for, a cool trek through the desert in Jordan.
Right.
They're looking for someone to help them curate a bit of a pilgrimage, which was my whole creation story with doing the pilgrimage on the Camino. So that tends to be the thread with how they come to me. And I'm not out there looking
that.
for the most hikeriest of, that's not even a word, like
I love that word. I get it.
hardcore hiking women. Like, we're probably not for you. We're more for the woman who wants an adventure. Maybe she hasn't really pushed herself necessarily in the outdoors. So she wants to be. I love it. I love it. I love the tail. So she wants to feel challenged, but she also wants, a bit of a spiritual experience. And I'm not talking religion. I'm talking about being able to go within, and we do a lot of meditating, and I literally curate a program around connecting with self and with other women. So I have turned people away who are, they're just looking to have a super cool hiking experience and they want to do it fast.
Right.
And they're like in the best shape of their life. And I have to tell them, like, look, we have some other people coming and, they've never done any hiking before. So you're maybe going to feel held back. And they're like, well, I don't care about any of that meditation stuff. And I'm like, well, we're probably not for you. This is the whole point. So how do people come together? I'll give you an example. In February, I have a group of women meeting me in Guatemala. We are literally going to meet at the Guatemala City airport. Guatemala City is not a place that anyone really wants to hang out in for long because it is a bit dangerous. But I've got a program lined up. We're going to spend a night there, and then we'll transfer to the town of Antigua, and we're going to have a 2-week really cool hiking, climbing volcanoes, self-restoration experience over the highlights of what Guatemala has to offer.
Sounds so good. So it's so neat to hear how you build that journey to self inside these journeys. And and that doesn't sound too intimidating.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely don't want it to be, obviously. Everyone gets a journal, for example, and it's got all kinds of really self-reflective prompts, and not everyone uses it, and that's okay. You know, each to their own. But the point is that they know that they're coming into an experience where vulnerability is welcomed, in fact, encouraged. We're not just going to sit around the campfire and talk about all the epic hiking we've done in our lives, you know, one-upping each other, which is kind of what happens when you have an adventure and you go with some company. There's a lot of like comparing notes and where have you been and what have you done and yada yada. No, we're going to be sitting around the campfire talking about when did we feel like we dropped the ball on putting ourselves on the list. And we're going to have really tough conversations where, you know, there might be some laughter, there might be some tears. And I know this because this is our formula. This is what we've done.
And I was at an event recently, and they said the best kind of friends are the ones in the same conversation. You have laughter and you have tears.
Yes.
And
yes,
and
absolutely.
I love that. That's
absolutely. It's just about being able to be real. You know, we had a really wonderful group of women come to Norway, and I did know a few of them. Some of them I did not know at all. And by the end of our 8 days together, we all felt like sisters, and we talked in the most unfiltered way. I don't think I've ever talked so openly about some pretty taboo things. And it was just like the most refreshing adventure, even for myself as the person leading it. I was like, man, this was meaningful, you know? And you try to explain that to people, and it's hard to explain. It's kind of like you had to be there.
Yeah. Oh, you know,
Yeah.
like on regular trips, because I've done a lot of traveling and a lot of solo traveling, particularly before my son came along. And I always had this motto that if death wasn't on the line at some point, it was hardly a vacation. Since my son came along, I've kind of changed my motto.
I love that. I love it maybe a little too much. That is awesome.
Well, I think actually when you are in that slog, in the corporate slog, and or anything where your regular life is just taking over and you can't really find yourself anymore, that it's hard to imagine too many steps outside of the comfort zone. And so whereas before, either it's a little bit easier because you don't have as much riding on it and your mind is still quite free in some senses. I'm not sure if that makes any sense, but I'm just trying to think of the me before things got really busy and the me after.
No, I think it makes a ton of sense. And I actually can remember like a life changing moment when everything switched for me. It was the moment when I knew that I didn't know who I was. And my youngest daughter was like a year and a half, and I was folding laundry that just never seemed to ever get properly folded or put away. And I was drinking wine, and I was just feeling like I was in some repetitive Groundhog Day situation. And I didn't know like who I was. And I remember I flicked on the TV because why not add one more distraction? And there was this thing, a documentary on climbing Mount Everest, and I just became transfixed. And I binged the whole, it was like a 10-part series, and I binged the whole thing, even with a 1.5-year-old running around. And I decided, maybe that's what I'm missing in my life, is that I've been so buttoned up and so responsible that I've left no room for uncertainty, for any kind of element of danger, of risk. And I think that's why I was glued to it. So it was in that moment that I decided I have to make a change. And that led to trying to climb some mountains and yada yada, which helped inform my sort of where I am right now, which is a girl who likes adventure. But I literally remember thinking, like, I don't even know who I am. I don't even know what I like. I don't even know if I like being a mom. I love my kids, but I just felt like depleted on another level. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, totally.
I
It
hope I don't
totally
sound
does.
terrible. I do love my children very deeply, but I'm just keeping it real. I was like, who am I? I'm the
Yeah.
mom, the career person, the organizer of the birthday parties, the cleaner of the house, the grocery person, the dog walker. I'm like all these things, but I don't know who Sam is. I
Well,
have
and
no
it's so
idea.
easy as well to become a chameleon in any situation that you're put in. And I find as women, we do that so well. I've got, numerous friends who I know, you know, I used to do it all the time, became who the room needed me to be. And
Yes.
same with friends that I know who do it. And and just being so detached that I was always sitting in somebody else's conversation. I was rarely present. And it was such a switch that happened when I realized that I was doing that all the time. I was just
Hmm.
so not present, and I was trained to be not present from my parents, particularly my mom, because that's how you're a people pleaser, is if you are paying attention to everybody else's cues and making sure that when somebody goes off, you can detect it before anything is interrupted, or so you can make sure that the room is okay, or that person's needs are taken care of before your own. And I think a lot of women do this, and you leave yourself, particularly you leave that little girl 5 miles back. And I
Hmm.
feel that your trips are an amazing opportunity to go and pick her up, say, I'm not leaving you anymore, you're
Oh,
coming along.
yes. Oh my gosh. I need to use that's a great metaphor. It's
Yeah.
true though. It's really true. And I never actually had it kind of couched in those terms, but be who the room needed you to be as literally how I grew up and how probably so many Gen X women,
Yeah.
we were the yes daddy generation, like please your parents. That's a really profound way of saying it.
So I know that we don't have a ton of time left before we have to wrap up. I really feel like we're having a coffee date, and so I brought my
I know,
I
this is
brought my
awesome.
Canadian cup to the coffee date, and I
Oh,
think
I
this is
love it.
Canadian takeout. And I know that behind those walls, is full of snow. I'm on the west coast of the country, so it's just raining. But these always make me laugh and make me feel very, very Canadian,
That is a
and I
great mug.
isn't it? So I love how it just feels like a coffee date chatting with you, and I get the feeling
Yeah.
that that's what your trips would be like. And I would love to come on one of your trips one day, and we'll look to see how I can make that happen. But from what I've seen, it seems great, and just getting to spend that time with you. So from all the things that you've observed from your trips and the big changes, is there some wisdom that you can think of off the top of your head that you would share with our listeners to help them make a decision or just see a change? do something that
Mm-hmm.
feeds their inner selves.
Yeah, I mean, some common themes and epiphanies from my clients and even myself, because I'm still on a journey of learning and figuring out who I am. One of them is that, if we don't give ourselves a chance to find out what we're made of, we could get to the end of our lives and never really have tapped into that power. And when you can tap into that power, it will spill over into all the areas of your life. So I had a woman come to Jordan and she was quite concerned about the challenge of the hiking. And it was very rugged and very intense and probably the most physical thing she'd ever done in her life. And at the end of it, she realized, like, I can trust myself.
Oh,
I am stronger than
beautiful.
I think. And that self-trust piece of knowing that, you do have what it takes is really what we need to make a decision and make a pivot or a change in our life. And whether it's huge change, life overhaul, or just something as simple as deciding that you're going to try and make your health a priority. Like knowing that you can do it and proving to yourself is so powerful. So I think that's my takeaway. The punchline of all of these adventures that I've done for women is to help show them that they already have what it takes. They just
Right.
haven't discovered it in that way that's going to like light up their self-trust. Does that make sense?
Oh, it totally does. You already have what it takes. And do you know what? When I thought of our meeting today and our call, I was thinking of this song, and there's the main lyrics from the song, and I just have to play it for you because I think this just reminded me of you. And I don't know how well it'll work in the phone, but we'll give it a shot here. Okay.
I
That is
love it.
that's I was like, this is Sam. This is so Sam.
I love it.
This made me
It's so
want to. I'm
true.
going to send you the links to that song.
It's so true. It's so true. And the last thing I'll say is the reason why I named this little business She Walks the Walk is because that is the thing, is just doing the thing, walking the walk, and not just like thinking about it and humming and hawing or thinking you're not worthy of 5 days on your own in Hawaii. Like,
Yeah.
just do the thing.
Do the thing. Take the action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I think we've inspired a lot of people, or I think you've inspired a lot of people to take the action.
Oh my gosh.
So thank you so much, Sam. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you, Shannon. I am honored, and I'm watching, cheerleading you on from afar. And like we said earlier, I think that we're two women cut from the same cloth. So I am here learning as much as also being inspired. So thank you for having me.
Wasn't that a great conversation? Well, I wish I had kept recording because we kept chatting. And for anyone who knows me and my love of adventure, travel, empowerment, they will say, oh, what a shocker. So we got to the part where I was telling Sam that in my office, I had a card deck of Rumi's teachings. Rumi was a Persian poet and Sufi master. The deck was gifted to me by a colleague at my old company, and often people would come into my office and we'd draw a card. And I told her that my favorite quote from Rumi was, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." Sam gave me this wide-eyed, shocked look. That morning, she was moving some papers and something fell out. She put it on the coffee table in her sitting room where she had moved to just after we started talking. She showed me the card. It was from her dad's funeral 2 years ago. And on one side, the card had his picture, and on the other side was this exact quote: "The wound is the place where the light enters you." It makes me teary just thinking about it. What do you think? Thank you so much for listening. If you got something out of this episode, be sure to follow or subscribe Miles to Zen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen so you are notified about new episodes. Please take the time to leave a review, especially if you listen on Apple Podcasts. This will help more people access these inspiring and perspective shifting stories from our guests. And I'm so delighted to be reading your beautiful comments on my various platforms. Thank you so much for listening. See you next time.